Welcome one and all to a new series which I call Classics Retold. In this first episode, I present my version of the H.G. Wells classic, The Time Machine. Let's go. A young scientist who worked for a prestigious scientific research company was hard at work building a very special machine that nobody but himself and his team knew about. He was building a machine that would be able to carry a passenger on a journey through time. He and his team had been working on it for several months, using a company-allocated budget of £50 million for this project. Their research had turned up lots of theories and ways time travel could be achieved by the use of this machine. One day, as they were adding the final component to the full-scale machine and were ready to test it out, when a call came through from the boss's office, asking him in for a meeting. So he grabbed a big black box and headed down to the boss's office. He arrived at the office with the boss, who asked him what he'd been working on all these months. He showed him the contents of his big black box, revealing what appeared to be just a small model machine, and wasn't happy that he'd wasted £50 million of the company's money on just a small model. He explained that this model was just a smaller version of a machine he'd just finished building with the help of his team in his laboratory. "What is it?" the boss asked him. "This is a time machine," replied the scientist, who then explained that according to their calculations, this machine would be able to travel to the past or future. This small model was to aid them in conducting an experiment to test his hypothesis. He used a stylus pen to power the model. He then guided the boss through the experiment safely, and the model machine whirred into life, and after a few minutes, vanished into thin air. The experiment had succeeded. The boss congratulated him, dismissing him from the meeting. The scientist returned to his laboratory and climbed into the pilot's seat of the full-sized time machine. He powered it up, made sure everything was in order, and pushed the backward control button without setting a time and location. As he sat there, he saw the clocks turning backwards, and he was soon traveling through the cosmos as the time machine traveled. Before long, he stopped in a field of green. The date and location display told him he was in Salem, Massachusetts in the year 1692. He'd arrived in the time of the Salem witch trials and was at risk of getting caught and arrested for witchcraft, so he quickly hit the forward control button and was soon traveling through the cosmos once more. Before long, he stopped the machine in a busy city that looked very Victorian. The date and location display now told him he was in London, 1838. As he stepped off the machine, he saw a young orphan being chased by a mob of angry people yelling, "Stop, thief!" He managed to stop the boy and found out he was Oliver Twist. Realizing he couldn't change history, he returned to the time machine and hit the forward control button and was traveling through the cosmos for the third time. Had he really just gone back in time and met the real Oliver Twist? Was it this boy's life that inspired Charles Dickens? His head was spinning with curiosity. The machine eventually came to a halt of its own accord as it stopped in a garage behind a huge iron door. The location display didn't read anything, but it was the year he'd landed in that baffled him. He was in the year 802,701 AD, and he needed to know about the place and its natives. As he entered daylight again, he saw fields of green and a bright blue sky. A very curious-looking young woman approached him. She had light skin and blonde hair, and she was soon joined by a whole group of young men and women with light skin and blonde hair. He learned these people were called the Eloi, and the young woman talking to him was called Weena. As time passed, he learned there was a race of people who were used to the dark, as they'd adapted to it over the centuries, and these people were called the Morlocks, who were actually mutants who took the eldest Eloi down below to eat them. Realizing that he was next to be taken, as he was the eldest person there now, he devised a plan to defeat the Morlocks, but it required them to wait until dark. As darkness fell, a group of Morlocks came up to take some Eloi down below. He sprung into action, shoving a lighted torch in their faces, causing them so much pain that they retreated back to their dark underground dwelling. He had saved the Eloi after just appearing there from another world from their perspective, so he told them he was from their world, just hundreds of thousands of years in the past. He eventually returned to his time machine and pressed the backward control button and started traveling back in time. After a while, he stopped back in his laboratory, in the present. What an amazing adventure that was.
Welcome back to Classics Retold. This is the second episode, and this time we present a new version of The Tale of Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. Let's begin. Rip Van Winkle was an incredibly lazy young man whose wife was at her wit's end with him and his laziness. Take what happened last week, for instance.
He was lounged around watching television when I caught him and started nagging him to get off his bottom and help me.
He couldn't stand it any longer, so prepared his dog, and off they went to find somewhere quiet to rest. They found a shaded spot under a tree in the park and settled down to kip there. 5 hours later, they awoke and went home to bed, feeling tired from their long nap in the park. As they entered the house, he found his way barred by his wife, who demanded to know where they'd been, but he just settled his dog down and went up to bed.
What a lazy man,
she shouted at him as he walked up the stairs. One day, as he was walking his dog, they started to feel tired from walking, so they stopped under the same tree and fell fast asleep. This time he woke up to find himself in the same park, but his dog was nowhere to be seen. Thinking his dog might be running around the playing field, he tried calling out to him, but no dog came running back to him.
How could things have changed so much? It's only been a few hours, he thought, as he walked into town to find modern shops in place of those of the 90s and more modern cars driving down roads. Things seemed to have advanced at least 15 years since he fell asleep in the field. But how could that be? He checked his reflection in a nearby window and was shocked to see a much older man staring back at him. He glanced down at a newspaper and was shocked to learn it was now the year 2010. He had been asleep for 20 years and was now so shocked he wasn't watching where he was going.
As he listened to her story, he realized she was telling him about himself, and woke up to find himself in a futuristic new world of 2010. She told him she heard the story of a lazy young man who fell asleep in a field 20 years earlier.
You're talking about me, young lady. I'm the man from your story, he told her.
You're Rip Van Winkle? She replied in surprise.
That's correct, he replied.
After a while, she decided to show him how famous he was these days, showing him books and films of his story. Before he knew it, he became headline news as reports of an elderly man who fell asleep in a park back in 1990 had been found wandering the town in the present by a young woman after he woke up from what he thought was a few hours nap. This rose him to superstardom overnight, making him an instant billionaire. He was now automatically one of the town's leaders. And so ends this strange tale. Join us next time as we retell another classic tale.
Hello, and welcome back to Classics Retold. This is the third episode, and in the spirit of Halloween, I thought I'd present a retelling of the Aesop fable of the boy who cried wolf. Here we go. Harry was a young boy who lived in a small village community where everybody knew everybody. Whenever Harry had to do something he didn't like, he'd cry wolf, and the people would come running to his aid. One day, he was tasked with herding the sheep, and he was not happy. He thought looking at sheep all day was the most boring job of all. So as soon as he was up in field with the sheep, he looked around but noticed nothing. "Wolf!" he shouted out at the top of voice. The villagers came rushing to see what was going on, but saw no sign of a wolf. They were very angry because Harry had wasted their time. The next day, they sent him up there again as punishment for wasting their time the day before. But as he stood up in the field herding sheep again, he was so bored he decided to play the same naughty trick a second time. "Wolf!" he yelled at the top of his lungs, and when the villagers saw there was once again no wolf in sight, they were really angry because he had wasted their time just like the day before. On the third day, Harry was herding the sheep again as punishment for his tricks the previous 2 days. To entertain himself, he decided to count the clouds. A hungry wolf did see the sheep this time and caught a sheep. "Wolf! Wolf! Wolf!" he cried again, running through the village. This time, having no reason to believe him about it, the villagers ignored his cries, and so the wolf caught Harry and ripped him to shreds very savagely. He was dead, having been attacked and savaged by a wolf. Wasn't he very silly for sending out false alarms? There was a full moon that night, and a howling could be heard. Where was Harry now? Oh, there he is. He looks like a wolf.
Hi, and welcome back to Classics Retold for the 4th episode. It is a modern version of the Aesop fable The Hare and the Tortoise. Only this version is set during a school physical education class and is called Slow and Steady Wins the Race. It was time for PE class at Farmer Giles High School, and the Year 10 class was getting to practice their running for the upcoming cross-country run. The fastest boy in the class was Jake Hare, while the slowest was a boy called Daniel Tortoise. He was so slow he never won any race of any kind. "Jake! You're so slow, Tortoise. I'm going to win this race." "Daniel, shut up, Hare. I am going to win." "Jake, oh yeah, want to bet?" "Daniel, what do you have in mind?" "Jake, a race between just you and me across the whole playfield." "Daniel, all right, and if I win, you can stop picking on me for being slow." "Jake, you're on." The race was set up for that afternoon, so they used that lesson and their morning break to practice for their race. That afternoon, the race between Hare and Tortoise took place. Once the starting pistol sounded, the race began with Jake running as fast as he could, while Daniel treated it like a leisurely walk across the field. "Coach, come on, Daniel, speed up. This is a race, not a walk." Daniel took it slow and steady, while Jake ran on at top speed. By the time they reached the halfway point, Jake stopped under a tree for a rest, while Daniel casually walked past. "Daniel, come on, Hare. You'll never win like that," he said as he carried on walking as Jake slept on. Up ahead was the finish line, and Daniel was nearly there, which amazed him as well as the entire crowd, who began chanting, "Crowd, Daniel, Daniel, Daniel!" As he crossed the finish line and was hoisted by the crowd, who hailed him as a hero, Jake, who had been awakened by the crowd cheering and run to the finish line to find that Daniel had beaten him in the race, and joined the cheering despite feeling jealous of him for winning despite his slowness. "Daniel, you fell asleep under a tree, and that wasn't part of the race." Now obliged to live up to his end of their bargain, Jake stopped mocking him for being so slow, as he'd proven against all odds that slow and steady wins the race. And so that's the end of our story here today. I hope you learned something from it and were entertained.
Hello there, and welcome to the 5th episode of Classics Retold, where we're about to tell you a modern version of the tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We're calling it Goldilocks, the Girl Who Invaded Three Bears. Goldilocks was a girl who lived with her parents, who loved her pieces and knew she could be naughty whenever she went out. On this day in particular, she was planning to go for a walk in the woods. Her mother didn't like the idea of her walking through the woods alone and made her promise she wouldn't. Her father then chipped in to make sure she kept her promise by warning her of the wild animals that lived in the woods, especially the bears. After swearing that she wouldn't go through the woods, she was allowed to go out for her walk. She walked into town to keep herself busy, making sure she had money to buy food if she needed it. While she was looking around the shops, she walked into her best friend Red Riding Hood, who was out shopping for her grandmother, who was ill in bed. After a fun trip to town, Goldilocks caught the bus back. The bus stopped by the woods and kicked her off for disrupting the peace of the passengers. Now she was forced to take a shortcut through the woods to get home quicker. So she began to walk through the woods, despite her promise to her parents not to go in there. As she walked through on her way home, she met several friendly creatures. A little way through, she saw a quiet little cottage. Curious, she went and peered through the window to find it empty. She thought for a moment and had an idea, a very naughty idea. She tried the front door, only to discover it was unlocked, so she opened it and went inside. She was hungry after all that traveling when she spotted 3 bowls of porridge on the table. She tried the first bowl, but it was too hot. She tried the second bowl, but it was too cold. She tried the third bowl, and it was just right, so she ate it all up. She needed to rest after all that porridge, so she went to the living room to find 3 chairs. The big chair was too hard, the middle-sized chair was too soft, and the small chair was just right, so she sat on it, but it broke under her weight, so she landed on the floor. Naughty Goldilocks. Not only had she broken a promise to her parents, but she'd also broken and entered into a strange house she had found in the woods. She went upstairs and into the bedroom to find 3 beds. The big bed was too hard. The middle-sized bed was too soft. The little bed was just right, so she climbed in and fell asleep. Downstairs, the owners of the house returned from their walk. They were 3 bears. They noticed that someone had been eating their breakfast. "Who's been eating my porridge?" boomed Daddy Bear. "Who's been eating my porridge?" asked Mummy Bear. "Who's been eating my porridge?" cried Baby Bear, upon noticing his empty bowl. They went to sit down and noticed that someone had been sitting on their chairs. "Who's been sitting on my chair?" boomed Daddy Bear. "Who's been sitting on my chair?" asked Mummy Bear. "Who's been sitting on my chair?" cried Baby Bear, noticing his chair was broken to pieces. "That chair was an antique," raged Daddy Bear. They went up to their bedroom only to find someone had been sleeping in their beds. Baby Bear caught their home invader sleeping in his bed, so they stood around the bed. When Goldilocks woke up, she got such a shock to find 3 angry bears standing around her.
She tried to jump up and run, but Daddy Bear stopped her. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And what on earth are you doing in our house?" Daddy Bear demanded.
Goldilocks went silent at these words. "Perhaps you'd like to explain your behavior to the police," boomed Daddy Bear, and he called the police. The police arrived, the bears gave their report, and Goldilocks was arrested for breaking, entering, theft and squatting in a house that didn't belong to her. She was now in jail for her law-breaking behavior and facing 5 years in prison for her crimes. She was tried, convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison for her crimes. 5 years later, she was released from prison and made a formal apology to the 3 bears, who forgave her and they all became friends.